Hello everyone and welcome. In this recording I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming lunar eclipse that we have in the sign of Scorpio on the 5th of May 2023. This is quite an intense energy because it takes place around 15 degrees of Scorpio, more precisely 14 minutes and 58 minutes of this sign. So this does represent change. This does represent breakthrough, perhaps a forced breakthrough or breaking down to break through, but life, feeling, experience, something is not going to be quite the same after this eclipse. Now, this is ultimately a full moon in the sign of Scorpio, and one of the most relevant aspects that it holds is that it opposes, not exactly by the degree, but it does oppose Uranus in the sign of Taurus, which means that the sun is conjunct Uranus. So it is the principle of combustion with the principle of shock. This is without a doubt going to be a revelatory energy where something is revealed for everyone to see, everyone to know, everyone to use that information one way or another, collectively speaking, because the ruling planet of the eclipse, of the full moon, is Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. So, for everyone to be aware of that. And also, it is Pluto which governs secrets, which governs power, which governs, of course, money in the larger sense, the power of money in that sense, because this is a financial axis, Taurus Scorpio, and again, Uranus is in the sign of Taurus. So the awareness, the surprise, the shock, the epiphany, the Uranian factor comes from there. So it is susceptible to value. It is susceptible to something Venusian. So Venus at this moment, at the time of the eclipse, also holds some important aspects which are going to be nuancing the how we live through the eclipse, especially collectively, because she holds sextile with, let me just look, with Jupiter, of course. She holds a sextile with Jupiter, which expands the feeling, which expands the dual side of the eclipse, because this eclipse, using the symbolism, the higher symbolism of Scorpio, it ends something or it brings something to light where it is exactly the light of our awareness, Uranus, that ends it because we process it, we integrate it, but it births something new, and that might be this eclipse on its own because it is regenerative. It is like a resurrection, but it can simply come from the past solar eclipse that we had in the sign of Aries on the 20th of April, 19th, 20th of April. It can be something new being born from there, from that energy, and this eclipse just cleared the way, or it gave a sense of clear direction by revealing something. Now, on a world stage, of course, this is a financial energy. So, without a shadow of a doubt, a part of this is going to be financial. And also, Pluto squaring the node of the moon, nodes of the moon in the same axis, Taurus and Scorpio. This further adds that it's also, amongst so very many other things, financial. It affects us financially. Mercury retrograde also in the sign of Taurus, and Pluto went retrograde before the eclipse. This is also very important because Pluto, just before the eclipse a few days, was standing still in the sky. That means its intensity is that much stronger, starting to retrograde back to anaretic degree of Capricorn. That brings the intensity, that brings the how should I say, the singularity of the purpose, even karmically speaking. So it is going to be intense, and it is something that we need to be aware of. For example, austerity measures. There is no other way. For example, Uranus, it is what it is. Austerity measures are part of the game and how we feel about it once it is revealed. But the other energy, because this Jupiter and Venus sextile, it can be something that is revealed through a legal case, court of justice. Jupiter in Aries, the court ruling, the fight for justice. Venus in Gemini, the moment when it is disclosed, revealed, communicated. And Venus also squares Neptune, disillusion. Finally, this is the version, but how do we react to it? Because our reactions, our feelings, how we see it, how we perceive it is highly, highly, highly subjective. So if it's bad, for example, it's bad because we kind of see it that way and want to see it that way. So this square invites us to take even subjectivity into our hands and see how much we allow in any sense. So if it's something positive, if we allow the positive to be way too highlighted in that sense, it can come through as egoistic in that sense. It can come through as self-centered. It can come through a really bad way. But, if the bad is highlighted, well, then it's without a shadow of a doubt, it's drama, it's miscommunication, it's gossip, it's panic, spreading false news but in a panic mode. So there's not necessarily bad intent there, but it's not doing anyone any good. So, how do we feel about the information? And the square also invites us not to feel anything until we see the bigger picture, the full picture, which of course comes an eclipse in Scorpio. It comes, but it might not come like this. Even though it might come also like this, because Uranus is kind of instant. Uranus likes things pretty quickly. And at this moment, if I'm not mistaken, Uranus still holds a sextile with Mars. So again, now speaking about Mars, Mars is also very important because after the eclipse, as the moon progresses forth in the sign of Scorpio, it will hold a trine with Mars, sorry, it will hold a trine with Mars. Mars is protective energy in the sign of Cancer. I do believe it is still out of bounds, so it is very, very protective of the shell, of safety, of family, of everything that is sacred to it. So there is a lot of intensity, a lot of energy in there. And I do see this as a good energy because it will get there. Whatever this perhaps shocking side of the truth, the revelation, the disclosure is, the intent, Mars in the sign of Cancer, to get past it already, to actually integrate it in as a useful element. For example, if it's not all that good news, well, it's still good in the sense that I'm not gonna do this again, I can't count on this, this is the way it is, and I have to dissociate it because it's a release ultimately. So it helps us to make it very quick, intense, like when there is like a tick installed into the skin, well, the best course of action is to try and pull it out quickly in a sudden movement. Not to, it can be like this kind of release. Quickly, powerfully, but efficiently. And maybe this is the significance of the Neptune and Venus square, because these planets are each other's octaves. Venus the lower, Neptune the higher. That only if we dwell on it is it not ending quickly. You know what I mean? If we try to water energy, trying to go with the flow helps a lot. And also, Saturn is in the sign of Pisces. Time is not its old self. It's a bit not linear. It's a bit dissolved. It's a bit washed away in Pisces. But that also means inner time. We are the kind of person who takes 10 years to get through a heartbreak. Maybe right now it takes us 10 days. It's atypical, but this is one of Saturn's gifts. Or regeneration. Instead of a year, we somehow pull it through in a month. Because the higher octave of Scorpio always, there is the secret, there is the mud, there is the poison, there is the toxicity, there is getting what I want. It is also a symbol, of the inner animal, sexual urges, the libido, getting the desires by any means necessary, financial energy, vanity, greed, never having enough. Pluto, one of the darker expressions of Pluto, controlling money to control everything, but no one, or better said, very rarely do we speak, even myself included, about the highest expressions of Scorpio, where Scorpio can be the medicine that works like a charm. How many like ointments and stuff like that contain viper venom, Scorpio, even like real Scorpio venom, spider venom, this venom, that venom, plant venom, and the venom itself is the healing element, or you know what I mean. So the venom of Scorpio, perhaps ultimately it has a healing purpose. It has a purpose to integrate something very, very, very rigid into a more divine expression. And this is where, yes, it is the snake shedding its skin, molding, but also the phoenix, the rebirth. Scorpio has the most to do with the phoenix because it is the energy of rebirth, it is the energy of resurrection, it is the energy even of mutation, where, you know, usually fixed signs don't change quickly, but sometimes change doesn't defeat the expression of the energy. I can't say a person or an animal. Or if change cannot truly crush and defeat, then mutation takes place, where both sides will coexist in the same form forcefully. That's mutation. It's adapted, but perhaps it adapted in a unusual way, in a violent way, in a starker way. And this is how I also see this energy, where it will force its adaptation, or it will resurrect, rebirth, recall something, make it whole again, but in a newer way. In a newer way, meaning that it has to have its more divine expression. Like, let me give you an example. Under this eclipse, this full moon, for some people it will become obvious that they cannot stay in their jobs and at their places and their place of work anymore. And this will cause a storm. Mercury, brainstorm, value storm, Venus, but Venus also, let's not forget that she holds the sextile with Jupiter. A true moment of interiorization. And then they find out that they love the work, they love it to bit. It's really the company that's not okay. And there comes the truth, the decision by a company. Let's find a newer way to do this job, a new company, or let's go self employed, or let's. And there it is, a higher expression. If the company limited the person, or started limiting it, in a way it broke the person to be free. And that person is gonna do something, let's say, either independent or get into a place where it gets what it needs, the appreciation or whatever the blockages were. So this is how I see this eclipse playing out. Or in lives of some people, for example, partnerships. Well, the partner has a big secret, something maybe that is not necessarily bad intent or deception, cheating, etc., yet still is something that weighs heavily on the soul. They come out with that secret, and it doesn't reflect whatever they feared won't happen, but a compromise is reached, a solution, acceptance, or whatever, because other aspects are quite harmonious. And now, of course, it's not an easy energy. I'll tell you that, because another aspect, one of them was that it is opposing Uranus. So hence the shock, the truth, the earthquake, political earthquake, financial earthquake, externally speaking, value earthquake. Uh, Jupiter sextiling Venus also can mean protests and uprising and etc. Why? Because Gemini is rebellious. Gemini also embodies the spirit of rebellion. So people asking for their rights. So this can also have that element to it with Uranus. But of course, and actually, since it is a full moon and an eclipse, so the karmic energy with Uranus involved, very high chances are that it manifests in a very suggestive way. For example, Scorpio, ecological accident, accident at sea where oil spillage, something with toxicity, something to do with laboratories. Again, when the COVID outbroke in Wuhan, Mars was in the sign of Scorpio opposing Uranus in Taurus. And this says a lot. And let's not forget Pluto's retrograde. So that digs deep, the truth, the revelations, the secrets. So this can, affect voters in certain ways. And, this can even cause, again, illnesses, sicknesses, or the karmic sewage to be spilled. But not necessarily to cause any harm, but to take care of it, for us to take care of the problem, collectively speaking. But of course, this can also change certain kind of behaviors in us collectively. We might be opposing all of a sudden something collectively, opposition. You're in a supposition. We might not agree to it. So there is an element of shock and surprise. Another thing is, Scorpio is the sign of the rich and the powerful. It can have a lot to do with sexual secrets, who did what, their plans, disclosures by accident, that email, that communication, something becomes viral and changes stuff. In the political world, there will be backstabbings and all of that, but whatever news is coming is shocking. And I forgot the aspect. It T squares Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Leo. It's heavy on the heart. It's revolting. It is, fearful either, or angry, anger, rage. Black Moon Lilith is the primal moon. So it's the primal, uncontrolled feeling in the heart. Well, obviously, it is rage. It is, sickly passion, obsessive impulse. Not the this is Scorpio energy, yes, but Black Moon Lilith in Leo is not obsessive in a scorpionic way, but in an explosive way. The obsession unfolds in that moment. So, unfortunately, and I so hate to say this, some unusual or shocking crime or murder cases or something is also gonna be hitting the news, but those are like a gesture. Those like a cry out, like the eclipse. This is the truth, but let's end it forever, Let's end something forever, something that's ultimately the sewage. And before I move on to the signs, I would also like to say that the Sabian symbol of this eclipse also speaks very powerfully, because it is children playing around 5 mounds of sand. Now, even the Sabian symbol contains the number 5. And this is quite, 15 degrees. That's 1 5. Then there is the 5 within, the symbolism itself, and another 5 which does have no correlation to this, but it does to me. Mercury in the sign of Taurus, the 5 of Pentacles, the cold 5, the cold, truth, the stark, cold details that cannot be ignored. It is the sign of scarcity, where it is the scarcity, the basic needs being impossible to be fulfilled, that is the cold, hard truth. But it always digs. Number 5 digs for breakthrough. It digs to surpass something that is unsurpassable until that moment. So, for example, scarcity is like the soul's rejuvenation usually. Scarcity heals the soul deeply. Or so it is said in, classic mysticism. Not necessarily that modern time, let's say even mystics would agree with this in literal, but anyway. So children playing in around 5 mounds of sand. This speaks about creativity. This speaks about when a being becomes aware of its spirited nature, that it is spirited, that it is really spirit, that it is not the five senses on their own, but there is something that elevates the five senses. They rejoice in it, the playfulness, the creativity, the discovery, the adventure, the path of the alchemist, where Scorpio is the sign of the alchemy. It is sign of transmutation. It is the lab, the alchemical lab within us, within the stars, within everything. That is the energy of Scorpio. And the playfulness, the adventure, the innocence of it. But we must not forget it is the eclipse. It is eclipsed. So the innocence is cut off. Hence the truth, the revelation. If you want to stay innocent, don't do like this politician, this cleric, whatever scorpionic elements will come collectively, but individually, it will reveal something very, very powerful to us. Perhaps one which is hand in hand with an ending, a closure, a change, a permanent change. But going back to the Sabian symbol of the eclipse, this is where, yet it is the same creativity that goes on, that rebirths. The innocence is gained back by the awareness. We know the limit, for example, because this is an unconscious energy. Children, that means even if the spirit is fully there, but children don't have the responsibility yet, the control, the deeper expressions of knowledge, what Scorpio is so good at. Scorpio complicates it, it digs deeper, while Taurus is the opposite, the simple ways of nature. We don't need to know. Believing and just our common sense, being able to perceive it is enough. No, this is the axis. So these two energies permanently balance each other out, and they have to find a good measure where both are on healthy levels. But where I want to go with this is an eclipse, so it eclipses. But in order to make pure, in order to make new, in order to get back, retransform into a virgin, if that even makes sense. Now this actually exists in nature because every time a female tarantula sheds this exoskeleton, or how you call it, she does become a virgin again. How symbolic. The signs and the beings, even physical animal beings that are ruled by this certain kind of energy, they do actually speak about how the sign operates as well. And I do believe the Sabian symbol of the children does mean that a powerful moment of release, of acceptance, of seeing the truth, but in order to regain innocence. Now, after this being said, of course, one more thing. Now, Scorpio is also the sign of the occult, the sign of the unconscious, the sign of mysteries, the paranormal, and our attempt to have power over it. This is also an energy which will stir up energies, the shadowy energies as well. So, We might not feel all that much alone at the time of this eclipse in that sense. We might, our senses with Uranus, anxiously, they might be overflooded. We might feel that we're being drowned in whatever we perceive. So there's that side to it. But we must remember Venus and Neptune square, it only drowns us if we want to sink. If we, I can't say stay calm, but if we focus on the opposite, where the solution lies, what's good about it, how am I gonna use this to my advantage, then there is a lot of, option there to support the self rather than to help it drown it. Now, after this being said, I would like to say a couple of words, looking at my notes, on how this eclipse may influence the 12 signs individually. So let us begin with natives born under the sign of Aries, where for them it's the second eighth house axis. Of course, collectively speaking for Aries, not individually. Individually, where does this fall in your chart? The most affected people are who have relevant placements between 10 and 20 degrees of the fixed signs: Taurus, Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio. But of course, everyone is one way, in feeling at least. If nothing else, there's a shocking news collectively, and it really stirs you up. Because why? It doesn't have to do with your self as such, but if it affects your business, if it affects your rights, for example, you see, you know where I'm going. So, going back to natives born under the sign of Aries, well, this is where life might show you that where you are getting your resources right now, or until this period, this season, this might not even be a new energy. You might have been thinking about this ever since the beginning of the year. Where you have where you draw your resources from needs a change, it doesn't support you, perhaps. And what this eclipse might bring is awareness, acceptance that something, the resources are just an example, eighth house example. It can mean contracts, it can mean managing of finances, that find your businesses, sharing your resources with friends, family, etc., whoever you share something with. It can be inner issues, how external reality, modus operandi of this and that, work, job, career, whatever, any other area of life affects your health, affects you hormonally, affects your lifestyle, even though it's not necessarily sixth house, but it does reverberate in many places. So how something is destined, bound to be released, to be let go. And it's a final confirmation that yes, something is going, but this also triggers a regeneration. This can very well bring a completion, because this can play out in some lives of the natives that sacrificing something, well, it frees up a myriad of resources. And maybe the sacrifice is just an emotional issue. Okay, I'll move on now. I had enough. And that gesture itself frees up so much resources. It can also mean simply giving up on a silly principle or a silly pride or a bad view of things, a scorpionic perception perhaps, and that freeing up resources. Or you simply get resources, you get money from somewhere. Uranus, you find an ingenious way, a courage, a risk, something that ultimately might not even be all that new about you, something that you know how to do, you use again, and there you have a new way of managing finances, debt, financial matters. But of course, this can also be secrets, your secrets coming out. Somehow, something that you keep hidden, it gets out. A moment of disclosure. You tell a secret, you come out of the closet in one way or another, or of course, a powerful moment of sexual healing by accepting something within yourself. Moving on to the sign of Taurus, Now, of course, this kind of hits a chord, it hits a nerve, because Taurus natives will be the hosts of the sun, the one of the luminary bodies in this astrological configuration, and Uranus. And the sun is not tightly but still conjunct Uranus in their sign. So this is a big personal awareness. This is big personal that comes from them. But now we look at the moon, where it kind of influences their seventh house, if you know what I mean. So it will change a situation, a relationship, a contract, a way of managing relationships. I'm not necessarily speaking about romantic issues, even though maybe for some rare natives this can mean exactly a romantic situation, romance between them and their partners. I need more romance in my life, give it to me. If you can't, then we must think of something. There you go, an example. But this can mean where something is in life, something intervenes, and you and your partner have to find a new balance for it, or something terminates in one's life. Both of the partners will be affected by the same termination in any way, shape, and form. You know, one of the partners loses a best friend. One way or another, both of the partners are going to be affected in their own way, an eclipse. But of course, this axis is, you know, quite unusual because we share with partners even karma. So maybe the shock, the revelation, the truth comes from the partner. This is the situation and it affects you. But it can affect you in the best ways possible. This is where I mean that it is not necessarily doom and gloom, or not necessarily crisis, not necessarily shock, unless we really, really want to see it that way. And Taurus natives are not the best natives who react well on first impression. They get either way too shocked, way too angry. I do believe the esoteric ruler of Taurus is Vulcanus, volcanic energy, the eruption. Taurus does embody the liquid fire, the magma. Yeah, absolutely. It is Mother Nature and the living earth, yes, yes, but it's also what's underneath the magma, the heavy liquefied materials, the minerals, and all of that. So there will be, I imagine, a volcano moment in Taurus natives' lives. But how is it coming from them personally? Is it coming from a partner? And when I say a partner, not necessarily husband, wife in that sense. It can mean the job, the contract, the bank, whatever partner, and that will cause readaptation. But ultimately, we must not forget the rebirth element. It does make something much more yours, much more aligned to your truth. Then all of this is for the sake for you to live your truth, whatever that is. Moving on to natives born under the sign of Gemini. Well, this is quite an intense energy psychologically, emotionally, perhaps even physically, because this can affect health. This can affect like a hormonal change that has already occurred. That internally your body is balanced a different way and you need to be aware of it. For example, like with Black Moon Lilith T-squaring, I'm very, very certain that some Gemini natives are going to be becoming aware that they have high blood pressure and they will need a examination period. That what do I do about it? And this might cause a change of routines. Their diet changes, their lifestyle changes, some things will be different forever. Because the high blood pressure, chances are, is not really going anywhere, or even if it is, the diet itself for you to get rid of it would have already changed your life forever. But this can mean like autoimmune problems, this can mean the flare up of something. But if this is the case, the flare up is for you to fix it, for you to get rid of it. And Uranus, maybe especially for those individuals for whom their problems had like only a so and so kind of treatment. An experimental one is already approved, which works like a charm, and this is how they become aware of it. That something so much better than what you're using exists already. An eclipse, a flare up, which is, for example, uncomfortable, but where does it get us? To a much more ingenious Uranus solution. But of course, this can also be getting rid of an old trauma, a psychological issue, a fear, a hurt, a pain which we couldn't let go. For other natives, still, this can be very much about the service that they do. Maybe changes, permanent changes in their jobs, having to change companies, or something happens there, something is revealed. Because this is ultimately a revelatory energy. And this can also be, as I said, a kind of rebirth, because this all is meant to regenerate something. May that be your physical body, or may that be through new routines, simply your whole vibe. Because a custom fit routine for you, one that supports you, one that works for you, one that you can live with, makes you a different person as well. This is where the 12th house. And last but not least, this can also be a deep, deep, deep spiritual experience for some natives. Maybe something to do with escapism or the end of escapism. Moving on to natives born under the sign of Cancer. Now, for these natives, it's quite an intense energy because, as I said, Mars is in their sign. They are the hosts of Mars right now, and Mars will trine the moon after the eclipse. Mars will be at the time of the eclipse at around 21 degree of the sign of Cancer. So when the moon reaches 21 degree of Scorpio, it will hold this trine. And Cancer natives are definitely going to be feeling this. I do expect that this is a strong emotional energy. An emotion, a feeling, a dream, a hope came to an end. This can be, of course, disillusionment, but this can mean where I really reached the end of my journey in a graceful, in a beautiful way. For example, some Cancer natives, finally, I think I'm gonna end this job. Where ending the job doesn't necessarily play out as the dramatic way or the life crisis way. It's their calling to retirement. They are called, something new is born in their hearts and their souls. But in order for that new to be allowed to walk its path, the present has to be, closed. This can also be something to do with their children, in the sense that, for example, Cancer native parents, their child is moving out the home. Their child getting married. Their child did something where they're not a child anymore. Not in a bad sense, but a show of maturity, that adulthood, buying their own home, for example. And there comes the moment that it's not my little baby anymore. However, it still is, because the regenerative resurrection energy of the eclipse. But okay, I have an adult child now, but the pride, the love, the all of that is that much stronger. Okay, the little baby in the heart of the mother is just a memory now, but the adult child who is successful or who is doing this stuff, that is, there to stay, and this is healthy in a way. Because if a mother doesn't let go of the little baby, that is usually Black Moon Lilith in Cancer. The Dark Mother is gonna be born, which is not all that healthy. And the Dark Mother does dress every, gesture like this in good intent. So, you know what I mean? But it's really she cannot being able to accept that she's not that kind of mother anymore that does everything for the child. But this is just an example, but Cancer is the sign of maternity and parent and stuff like that. So that's why I also allowed myself to use this example. But something which is beautiful, which is nice, which reached the final stage. This can also be a reward, a completion. Your work of, I don't know, you how many years you worked on a project, finally it's done, it's ended, and you're sad because the colleagues, it was such a beautiful time of your life. But at the same time, if you want to stay with those people, begin a new project, and at the same time, usually when a project ends, there's party and there's reward, any type of reward. So there is that element. But whatever closure, ending, whatever feeling, emotion, or something that you loved reached its end, it chances are it will change your you know social behavior. Socially, you will start to be much more authentic to your truer needs. If a dream reached an end, it reached an end for the truer version of it, or a new dream to be born. So moving on to natives born under the sign of Leo. Well, for Leo natives, this is where it can be quite a heavy energy because it hits the roots. So again, for Cancer natives, I use the example of the child moving out from the home. Maybe this example is all that ideal for Leo natives as well. Maybe they are the ones moving out of the home. Something ends. Or this can represent changing homes or selling a home, even gaining a home through inheritance, for example. But this is where something at your roots changed. You need to release an old situation and, of course, embrace a new. For other natives, still, this can mean quite the opposite. They return home and stay there. They find the inner calling that they want to return home. They found their place and they want to go there, get to their longer term, so they have to terminate whatever is, keeping them from. This can also mean rearranging their home. This can also mean that they won't be alone anymore. Because why not? A situation can be terminated by a partnership. You have your home and your lives, your roots in a certain way, because this is lunar energy and south node energy. The way you always felt. Single life. That's not bad or good, but it's a certain feeling, it's a certain vibe, it's a certain modus vivendi. Eclipse, you're not alone anymore. You cannot do the things, live the same way, feel the same way. Even, I don't know, get your way to certain things, places, etc. the same way when you're not single anymore. So this can mean all of these matters. But of course, this influences the soul as well. Because Uranus in the 10th house for you guys, this is where it kind of comes from your soul calling. Your soul is receptive of this. You are in agreement with this. This is where, for some natives, it is where you get exactly where you need to be because something that hinders you is terminated, so you fly to where you need to be. Or, as I said, if it's something that you've always used to feel that way that terminates, It might be whatever comes after, a breath of fresh air ultimately, a wish fulfilled. But as I said, this can also be a little bit heavy because Black Moon Lilith is in your sign. So it T-squares it. So something to do with you guys, it's hard to process, if you know what I mean. Either it's hard for you to process that it changes your image of the self, or you won't never be seen or perceived the same way by others, family, friends, etc. A permanent change in roots. Marriage, for example, it changes everything, family dynamics. This is just an example why we don't need to think about doom and gloom and bad things immediately. Anyway, moving on to natives born under the sign of Virgo. Well, this is quite a big energy because I do sense that the way you guys are gonna be living this, perceiving this, that you find something or something finds you. Something that you've been searching for, an information, a contact, a plan. This is like maybe a justice, why not? What justice is in a situation, a court ruling even, something to do with business, but the legal side, something is dished on the table as truth, as clarity, as revelation, what your mind can grasp and can grip. Now, ultimately, the truth is benevolent, beneficial, and it will influence, without a shadow of doubt. It will influence a lot of things more internally first, but then externally much later on. Because, the sun, along with Uranus, is what for you guys is the ninth house. So this represents that it's your worldview, it is what you think of justice, what justice is, and it is also something that you might be going against, rebelling against, in spirit, in principle, in idea, and thought, and you see that dished on the table, and it gives you strength, it gives you power, it gives you clarity, it gives you all the right info to either have your justice, accept something that this is the way it is and it's not gonna change, and I release it and immediately something new comes after, like a new plan, a new initiative, or something is dished on the table, maybe something shocking in a good way, why not? That changes your whole plans, by a sibling, by a cousin, by a best friend. So, or maybe something that happens in your life is going to call upon the help of the best friends and siblings, and because the third house has a lot to do with this element as well, us brothers, sisters, and family members like that, not necessarily parents, but siblings and cousins. So this can play out in quite in shocking and surprising ways, but this can ultimately lead to a travel, it can lead to a quest, going to a foreign country, or adapting something that is done in a specific way, either in a foreign country, a foreign culture, or an international something. Especially if this is business, if this is specialization, if this is research and knowledge, this can be quite a good energy because it shows where not to seek, and it shows exactly where to seek. Just at Uranus, it's outside of the comfort zone. But as I said, this can play out in very many different ways, but it's shocking. But it gives you a certain kind of advantage in, you know, information, better said. Moving on to natives born under the sign of Libra. Now, for you guys, it is an energy which has a lot to do with value, so to speak. Some of you guys have to manage that, finances. Um, you might have to, adapt, because this energy is also one of forced adaptation to the external circumstances, banking, or something that you used to do financially a certain way, and now there's no choice but to change it. This can also represent something to do with inheritance. This can also represent something where resources might come from family or from an extended sphere. But this is where you need to manage them. Mismanagement can be a problem, but good management gets you there. And this is the eclipse. What is good management? What it is that you need to be aware of, what it is that, for example, is totally unreliable, or what it is that is there. It is so very, very there, but you are blind to it. So this eclipse can really get you in the right berth. It can be Uranian, very uncomfortable, but it can also be very healing, very regenerative. This is where you might have a lot of misconceptions about yourself, your worth, your sex appeal, why not? And it is the external that shocks you. Well, this is the truth. So stop believing that which is just internal fantasy, toxicity, or what other, for example, and I am so sorry that I have to use this example, there is such a thing as, I don't know how to word this, making love, let's say, with someone you really, really you're into. Now, if you or both expect that to unfold like you would see on the internet, if you know what I mean, well, then that's so very fake, and that's so very the lower expression of Scorpio, because you're convinced that that fakeness is real, and you see real as maybe an illness, or oh my god, it shouldn't be like that. Why? You know what I mean? Certain eclipses like this one really come as a slap. Like get real. That is fake. This is real. Real is real. You know what I mean? Fake cannot override Mother Nature's ways. This is natural. That is fake. And this is where some people can have to learn to distinguish about fake, how what is sheerly just a product of fantasy and exaggeration and manipulation, and to, to misuse psychology, and what is truly natural and the way Mother Nature intended certain stuff to work like, be like, you get what I mean. And then there has to come a moment when you see the natural and you wake up to the shocking fact that maybe all your life you thought that the fake was real, and that caused you so many blockages, which in a flash of an eye, in a moment, tens of years of misaligned belief are faded away. The moment of awakening, the moment of shock, moment of truth, which is deeply healing, absolutely, but there's also the scorpioning element to it, that how much harm was done before this eclipse happened. But this is, of course, just an absurd example of how it can be deeply healing and regenerative just by revealing a truth. And that truth was there all along, yet if we were blind to it, it didn't matter because we were blind to it. Moving on to the host of the eclipse, the sign of Scorpio. Now, this is quite an intense energy because this is where something changes within them. A status quo. Life is already rearranging for them. Or maybe they need to terminate something that was part of their lives until now. Maybe it terminated legally, maybe it terminated factually, but maybe now it terminates in feeling I'm no longer that, I'm no longer there, I'm no longer someone's partner, or I am now someone's partner and no longer single. So something deeply personal is being accepted, is being processed, that they're no longer something, or something is no longer part of their lives, their identity, etc. And of course, this will reflect on all their partnerships. Romantic partnership, if it's romantic partnership, then whatever happens to you, of course, your partner is there to co-live it with you. You change the job. The partner is also at least in thought there, because you know what I mean. But it can be your life rearranged totally. Your partner is also there. You terminated something for the sake of your partner. That changed you, but that also changes your partner. It changes your partner, of course, in the best sense possible, because if it was a sacrifice for the partner, they are, of course, coming with something, loyalty and love and all of that. And how much that does that change you as well? So, yes, but this can also affect in contracts, in partnerships, collaborations, etc., etc. This can also terminate a bad collaboration or something that factually terminated but in legally hasn't. So this is where termination truly takes place. Moving on to the natives born under the sign of Sagittarius. Now, this is quite an intensely spiritual energy. As I said, this can also have reverberations physically, as stress build up, a moment of pause due to stress build up, where the physical body takes a pause because of the psyche, because of inner forces. This is where whatever is happening within us affects the physical, but it's really much more about within us in the soul. For some natives, this can be heavily karmic, where some karmic debts are settled in any way, shape, and form. Karmic energies regulate themselves. This can even come from past existences, why not? Even from past lives. This can also represent true release of trauma, truly release of the past, or acceptance of the past. Something is being illuminated, is being, contrasted almost, so that we see it for what it always has been, and this can help us release, this can help us accept, especially if it's a bad event in the past that truly traumatized you. Let's say someone hurt you and something is being revealed that it was really, really not their intent. And for any reason now you believe that, you kind of get it wasn't that person's intent. You can imagine that spiritually, karmically, what a massive release that is, and that's a very powerful healing energy. But of course, this can be intense in dream, in anything unconscious, psychological. Feelings may be very, very strongly stirred up. This can also be, a bit of escapism, dream journey, spirit journey. But if it's anything spiritual, it's life changing. It is not a small thing, it is where it really impacts you. And it can also be secrets coming out. You confronting with a secret, or perhaps it is a secret from that you are keeping that comes out, or maybe a secret within the deeper branches of the family. So yes, for you guys, this can have something to do with the classic conception of secrets as well. And even sometimes in some cultures, astrologers also associate the 12th house with secret enemies. So an enemy is leaving your life for good. So in a way, that's pretty good. So moving on to natives born under the sign of Capricorn, well, this is quite an intense energy because you change. You change the way you look at life. You change the way you look at interhuman connections. You change the way society itself basically affects you. This eclipse I see is a communication, either a communication or a shocking news, a risk that will need to be taken and maybe inevitably. But this is where it's also about the sense of loyalty. Who are you? Were you loyal until now? And if that loyalty is still there, or if right now being loyal to a group, a dream, a principle, idea, a collective, anything like that, a group of friends, you being loyal to it is in your disadvantage. So maybe this is where the truth comes out, is born in your heart ultimately, that sadly it's time to move on. Sadly it's time, it can be a little bit like a disappointment, but more like the Five of Cups, the tarot card of disappointment reversed, where the solution is more important than the disappointment. The disappointment is actually positive, especially for Capricorn natives, because out of perhaps most signs of the zodiac, it is you guys who can take a disappointment or a letdown as not necessarily something all that bad. Not that you don't react impulsively to it, but when you process it, you can integrate it that X, Y, Z is unreliable, and at the end of the day, lucky me that I know never to trust. You know what I mean? So it can be such an energy at play where it's ultimately for the greater good, and we must not forget again the phoenix. It resurrects that area of life. It's gonna be different afterwards. Moving on to natives born under the sign of Aquarius, well, this is where it's either career or this is where something happens in the soul path. Um, of course, something has reached its final stages. Something no longer resonates with the soul. Either a modus operandi or how the resources are there, or simply your life, your roots, your lifestyle, your familiar situation, your living situation perhaps, your culture, where you are, doesn't necessarily support something that is valuable for your soul. What does that mean? Well, either you change the culture or you change the modus operandi. So Aquarius natives are gonna have a big change in this sense. A change in feeling, a change in their own truth, what doesn't resonate with their soul anymore, what they are not willing to take or tolerate anymore, and this stirs up ingenuity. This calls for them to dig deep and find elements of how they can progress out of there or progress all of this into something which suits their needs much more. I do believe that Aquarius natives are looking for greater harmony because they cannot make compromise. The soul path or career or whatever that is, whatever really pulls on their souls right now is very important, but the familiar stability and their basic comfort is equally as important. So they're not making compromises in a sabotaging way, in a self-sabotaging way. And perhaps that's why this eclipse is coming, to show them what would be self-sabotaging and what it is that they need to do in order for them to get where they need to be ultimately. And last but not least, natives born under the sign of Pisces. This is also a big energy because it is, I see, deeply philosophical. This might have to do with a big travel, a journey, a long distance travel where its spiritual significance is great. They release something, they release someone, they release a memory, or they return somewhere to purge out a bad memory, for example. But this can also have a lot to do with courts of justice, truth, legal case, justice matters, where they get their justice, and that changes everything. It changes the feeling. This can also represent that they see something of their deepest faith before their very eyes that shocks them, that basically changes their perceptions about so very many different things. And ultimately, this is where it refines their lower mind as well, their way of thinking, the way they see the smallest technical details in everyday life might be profoundly altered, changed by that experience which the eclipse may deliver to them. May it be an invitation to travel somewhere, may their souls call them to a certain place, because just like for Sagittarius natives, for Pisces natives as well, this can be deeply spiritual, but in a different way. It for Sagittarius natives, it has the deep personal mystery of the 12th house. For Pisces natives, it can much more be an adventure, a mysterious adventure of why is my feeling pulling me here, there, or... Oh, and before I don't forget, for some natives, this can actually be quite a good energy. Graduation. Congratulations, you're this specialist, that specialist. You've done it, you learned, you are no longer an apprentice, either in a real sense, but karmically, where fate, life, the universe gives you the diploma. Son, daughter, you're no longer a student. Here you go, you learned it. But this is also a moment when we need to behold our own maturity, which comes with certain kind of responsibility. We're no longer children. So this is how I see this eclipse. As I said, it can play out quite intensely on the world stage out there, and it can be very shocking and emotionally pulling, very, very pulling. So we must, you know, truly use the Neptune and, sorry, the Jupiter and Venus sextile instead of the Neptune and Venus square to make it our own, to integrate this experience in the most accepting and positive and releasing way as we can, because this triggers strong regeneration. Something ends in our lives, or we are called to accept something for healing or rebirth. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. If you'd like to support me and my channel, you can donate in the PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, thank you, and until next time, bye for now.